Okay, so I'm going to start off with thanking our organizers. So this is our third year doing this. As those who have attended prior years will recall, the first year was in person. Last year, with some headwinds, we had to shift to making it virtual. And now we're back in person, which we're all incredibly grateful to, as was alluded to in other talks, those that put immense amounts of time and effort into making this happen. Kelly took point on leading this year, but it's really a team effort from those shown here and everybody in the ALS Center. So I want to thank everybody for, again, putting together another really fantastic event for us. This is really, continuing to transition with gratitude and thanks. So I'm going to stick on this for a bit before concluding with something else. But I think, as was the case in prior years, really want to thank the patients and research participants and caregivers, family, other sources of support that made the effort to come here on a Saturday and take time out of your lives and go through all that it takes, as was alluded to earlier, to get here to participate. None of this at all happens without so many of you, and we're eternally grateful for that. I was thinking about, how to emphasize the importance of us being back in person this year. I think we did a really fantastic job last year doing this virtually, but there's just something different about it when you can be there in person with people and the connections and gathering. And so I really want to emphasize that. So again, coming back to the idea that so many people put time into coming here and putting the effort forth to gathering in person for this event, which I think it's tough to articulate exactly why, but it's so important that now more than ever we kind of connect face to face and gather as a group. Because of another book that I'm reading right now, this is really what rung true to me when I was thinking about what I was going to say to the group today. And we've heard, and Monique talked about this, and Amber alluded to it, but we're talking a lot about ALS today, but there's another epidemic in the world nowadays, and that's the WHO has declared a loneliness epidemic. And so I referenced this book, Bowling Alone, which is now a quarter century old, but this book was prophetic in a lot of ways. This book talks about our loss of social capital, that idea of being able to engage in trusted interactions and building community with others. And this was a book that was written around 2000, which was before the advent of social media and AI. And it was quite illustrative of a world where, again, the bowling alone comment is, more people than ever were bowling in the year 2000, but so few people were doing it in teams and gathering together to do it. And that's the concept, is we're more connected than ever via technology, but we're all very much more alone than we previously were. And I don't want to totally down-talk social media. It's incredibly important, especially for the ALS community, but it is a double-edged sword. And so I think investing the time to come together and be here in person is really invaluable to the spirit of the program and what we're trying to achieve as an ALS center community. And so along those lines, and again, this is not something that's unique to the general population. It very much has a huge impact on the ALS population, and I don't need to talk to this group about the impact of loneliness and the importance of connection for the ALS community, and that's both patients living with ALS as well as the caregivers and families that help navigate the disease. And along those lines, and talking about and finishing with the theme of connection and community, one of the things that personally for me, and I think I speak on behalf of a lot of my colleagues and those in the ALS Center, is the thing that we all find so rewarding and that fills our cup is the ability to be part of your community and the connections that we're all able to make in this long journey that we have working together, whether that's on a clinical trial or caring for you in clinic. And I wanted to conclude by sharing a video from somebody that's much more articulate than I am, who we've had a deep connection with his family over the last almost 5 to 10 years now. And this is a really powerful anecdote that he shared with me a few months ago, and I was just so moved by it that I asked him if he was willing to share this with the group, because for me it was just something that I found, again, so inspiring and rewarding. And so I made me proud to be part of this community, and so I figured I would cap the symposium with this video.
Hello. My name is Paul Knott. My wife Betty and I live in Hastings, Nebraska. And for those of you who have ALS in your family, I want you to know we can fully identify. We have a long history of ALS on my father's side. My dad died of ALS at the age of 43. So when I turned 40, I began to wonder when that horrible disease was going to attack my body. But here I am decades later, and thankfully I'm in good health, for which I am very thankful. However, 8 years ago, our 39-year-old son at the time, Jason, was diagnosed with ALS. He had the SOD1-AV5 genetic mutation. They gave him 18 to 24 months to live. And here we are, 8 years later, and he is still with us. But it's very difficult. Right now, about the only part of his body that he is able to move at all is his right foot, and sometimes he can barely move it. But I've noticed that sometimes in the midst of some of our darkest days, there are things that happen that bring us amazing encouragement. And that's why I've been asked to share our story today. Several months ago, Jason and his wife Melinda approached me and asked if I would be willing to help them find and purchase a wheelchair van. They had been using a rental van for many years for Jason's monthly infusions and for his doctor appointments, but it wasn't working very well at all. And so they knew they needed to make a change. And so we began to talk, and they told me that they thought if we could raise $20,000, they then could use some of their funds and end up combining with the funds raised, be able to buy a good used wheelchair van. And so on March 30th, 2026, on a Monday, I established a GoFundMe page so that we could raise funds for a wheelchair van for Jason. And it was very encouraging. Within a couple of days, the total was over $5,500. Then it grew to over $10,000, eventually growing to over $20,000. And then the Thursday after the Monday where I posted the GoFundMe page, they received information from a man who wanted to talk to them regarding their wheelchair need. They asked if I would contact this man, and so I did. The next day on a Friday, I texted him, and then he called me back a few hours later. And one of the first questions he asked me is, what kind of van are Jason and Melinda looking for? And I told him that they were looking for a Honda or Toyota in good condition with leather seats and a side entry ramp. And he says, "You're kidding. My wife died of ALS a year and a half ago, and I have a 2023 Toyota Sienna Hybrid, top-of-the-line wheelchair van with everything you're looking for. And it has less than 1,000 miles. He said, "Do you think they'd be interested?" And I said, "Well, they might be." I said, "What is your asking price for this van?" And he says, "I don't want to be paid for this van. I want to donate it to Jason and Melinda." You see, his daughter had alerted him to this need that Jason and Melinda had. She was a friend of Melinda's sister, and Melinda's sister had sent her that information. And then that daughter had then sent the Caring Bridge link and the GoFundMe link regarding Jason's situation to her father and said, "Dad, you must read this." And he did. And what he read touched his heart. He told me that he had been praying and asking God what he should do with this wheelchair van. And he told me, I really believe Jason is an answer to that prayer. Well, by that time, I could hardly keep from crying because my eyes were filling with tears, but we were able to continue our conversation. And he said, the one problem I have about donating this van to them is I don't know how I'm going to get it to you because I live in St. Louis. And I said, you're kidding. Remember, this was on a Friday, and I told him, this very next Monday, my wife and I are flying to St. Louis. I'm part of an ALS trial there. I'm part of the Atlas trial. And once a month, we fly to St. Louis where I receive a physical exam and an infusion. So we will be arriving in St. Louis on Monday. He says, I think that'll work. He said, what day would you like to meet up with me? And I said, well, I think Tuesday will work. I'll have my exam and infusion in the morning, and then if you could come around 2:00 on Tuesday to our hotel, that would work great for us. He says, that'll work. He said, where are you receiving your infusions? And I said, well, I'm receiving them at Washington University. And he said, you're kidding. That's where I took my wife when she was battling ALS. They're wonderful people. He said, do you know Dr. Sean Smith? I said, yes, we know Dr. Sean Smith. We've met him several times. And he said, we love Dr. Smith and his staff. They are wonderful, caring, supporting people. So he knew exactly where we were. So on that Monday, my wife and I flew to St. Louis. Tuesday morning, I had my infusion. Tuesday at 2:00, this man drove up to the Doubletree Hotel in this beautiful silver Toyota wheelchair van. We were able to meet him. He took us to a parking lot. He showed us how everything in the van works. And when we looked at the odometer, we realized not only did it have less than 1,000 miles on it, it had less than 450 miles on it. It was like new. He then handed us the title, signed over, so that Jason and Melinda could register the van. He also handed us an envelope that had money in it. He said, you know, I've looked up on the internet what it will cost for them to pay sales tax on this van, and I want to help with that as well. And so he gave me an envelope filled with cash. That day we took possession of the van. The next day we drove all the way back, some 7 hours back to Lincoln, Nebraska, where Jason and his family live, and we gave them their new wheelchair van. And the next day they used the van to take Jason to his doctor appointment. I contacted the GoFundMe people who had made donations to Jason's wheelchair account, and I told them that we no longer needed all of the funds we had raised because of this wonderful provision of a van for them. And I told them if they would like, I would be very happy to return the money they had donated because our need had been met. Not one of them asked for any of that money to be returned. They wanted that money to go to Jason's ongoing needs. In 10 days, God provided for Jason a wheelchair van, brand new. He provided the sales tax needed for that van, and he provided over $20,000 for them to meet their ongoing needs. No man could put all those things together. Only God could do something like that. So we are very thankful to God. And we are so very thankful for the amazing ALS team in St. Louis, who is playing such an important part in our lives and in this story. Thank you.
And I believe Paul is attending online. So again, I just want to thank Paul for sharing such a moving story and really helping us cap the symposium today. So thank you again. And we'll adjourn to lunch, and this is the survey that you can use. We've very much valued the feedback that has been given with prior years, so please do complete the survey. And we did not actually get to all the questions, so we will make sure that we send those out to the attendees in due time. Thank you again for coming.